I often find that surveyors and estate agents regard outline planning and full planning in the same category, and I find this very misleading because in fact there is, first of all, huge cost implications between the two different types of planning, but secondly also what you can do and cannot do with each of those planning types varies considerably. So in this video we're going to explore what the differences are between outline planning, full planning, and how to make the distinction and what the potential cost implications are. Hi, my name is Jim J. Davidson and I'm a property developer. I first got involved in property in 1973 at the age of 16 when my brother and I purchased a flat in the student area of Edinburgh. My current company, Fineside Developments, was established in 2003 and we completed our first new build in 2006. This channel is really dedicated to providing you some of the things that I have learned along the way. I'm not an expert. I don't profess to know everything, but what I do know, I hope, will help you on your property journey. For context, we are in the find it phase and the detect stage. So what is outline planning? Well, very simply, let's take a piece of ground. And we'll just have a nice square piece of ground. And what outline planning says is that we've looked at your piece of land and we think you can build a house or several houses on this piece of land. So depending obviously on the size of land, we believe that you can put in a house or maybe 10 houses or whatever it is in terms of the size of land. But it doesn't tell you where the houses are going to be within this piece of land. It doesn't tell you what the style of houses are going to be on this piece of land. It's the simplest type of planning to achieve. It is the least expensive type of planning to achieve. Although it's becoming a wee bit more onerous now, they are asking for certain more conditions when they grant outline planning. But it used to be that you could simply say, here's a piece of ground, I'd like to build on it. And it was a very, very cheap application process. And that's the reason why people who have no intention of building on this land will often just go for outline planning and then put it on the market. And of course, if somebody is quite willing to pay for that, why would they go to the additional expenditure? And so therefore, you really have to have an understanding, because when you actually go to negotiate the price on that piece of land, you've got to really understand what your cost implications are, and you need to actually explain these to the estate agent and the vendor or the surveyor. And it's interesting, with a conversation recently with a surveyor, he told me he understood this principle, but actually what he told me that he didn't understand this principle. So that's essentially what outline planning is. What detail planning is, that or full planning is what you can say is that, and if this was a single house plot, then you could build a house here, and you could put the house, depending on what the size of the house is, in other words, depending on what the size of the ground is, should I say, will determine the size of the house. Now, where I currently look for opportunities, the proportion of land to house is about 1/3 of the footprint. That's not the size of the house, but 1/3 of the footprint to 2/3 of land space or garden space. So if this was a 300 square meter site, then we could get on a 100 square meter house. Now, of course, if that was a 2-story house, then that would give us a 200 square meter house. If it's a 1.5 story, then you're looking at somewhere about 150. It may be that this is a much larger piece of land, and let's say it's an acre of land, and so therefore you're going to want to have several houses on here. And the thing about this is that obviously, as you put more houses on here, you've got to then design these houses. So there's a cost implication in terms of designing these houses. Even if it's a single house, there's a cost implication in terms of designing the house, because you now need to employ somebody who's skilled to interpret what you want to put on there, and that could be an architectural technician, or it could be an architect. So depending on what you want to put on there, you're going to need somebody to interpret that, and they will then submit the planning application. So you're going to have their fees. You've got additional fees obviously for that further planning application. But not only that, is that the planners are going to come back usually with certain things that they're going to require. Now, you may have already put this in as part of your original submission because you're aware of these things. So they might want, depending on where the ground is, a ground contamination survey done. They may be concerned about where you're going to dispose of your water. To this point, I've got a checklist that I've prepared, and when you can download that checklist from our membership site. So if you're not a member of our membership site, there's a link in the link below. In the description below. It doesn't cost anything to join. It's a free membership, and it will give you access to that tool, plus other tools, plus other courses, in all honesty. So it's well worth getting that checklist and getting access to the additional material. Anyway, going back to this, so we've now got our piece of land. We've then applied for planning. We've got the full detail planning, which has cost us more money. And then in addition to that, we're going to have to submit building standards application, or building control, depending on where, or building warrant, depending on which part of the country that you're in. So that is a further additional expenditure, and the cost of that application is determined on the end value, or the construction value, should I say, of your house. And they have parameters, so even if you can build for less than that, they're going to say, no, this is what we reckon the minimum you can build for. So it's based on what their perceived construction cost is of that particular piece of property. But coming back to what the main thrust of this is how much should you be paying for this piece of land? Well, if it's got full planning in it and it's got full building warrant, then you've taken out a lot of the expenditure that you're going to incur if it had only outline planning. So it makes sense that you be prepared to pay more for this piece of land. However, if it's got none of those things, then that should be being deducted off the value of the land. And just to quickly talk about how you value land, although I do have another video on this, it's simply the value. So we call this GDV, gross development value. Then we've got the build cost. Sorry, this is a bit small, you probably can't see this. And then in addition to that, we've then got our profit, which will be expressed as gross development value. Again, I'll have another video on this. And then we have what the land value is. However, the land value will be determined by how much work we had to do before we actually got to the point of where we could build. So that's going to be the cost. Again, in other words, the difference between outline planning and full planning, or full planning and building warrant. Now, there's one further thing I'd like to touch on here, and I find this particularly annoying when I see places advertised and they've got what we call lapsed planning. In other words, at one point they had planning, and it may have only just lapsed, but a planning application or a planning approval stays in force for 3 years unless you are able to keep it in perpetuity by actually doing some significant start on the work. And that would be usually some concrete in the ground, to be honest, would be considered a significant start. Also, just on a point on that, is that if you are doing that to preserve planning, make sure that you get confirmation from the planning authorities that they agree that you have made a significant start, because I've seen so many people fall at that hurdle, thinking that they've done that, thinking that they've satisfied it, submitted to the council, yes, we've made a significant start, but never had a confirmation of that, and then found that actually their planning had lapsed. So just a point there to be cautious on. But obviously, if something's had planning but it's lapsed, then it's as good as having no planning on it. Because the argument the estate agent will make is, or the surveyor will make, is that, well, it's likely to get planning. Well, yeah, it may be likely to get planning, but it also is likely it might not get planning, because the terms and conditions of why it got planning in the first place may have changed. And of course, a new application will open up the field to objections that may have not been relevant the previous time, but now may be relevant. So be very, very wary about buying land that has lapsed planning on it. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy it, but it should be very much reflected in the price and part of that negotiation process. So if it's got lapsed planning, then I certainly would, first of all, either make it conditional on planning, on full planning. I would also, secondly, want to have some sort of cost benefit to myself, because I am going to put the work in. I'm also going to risk the fact of that cost of actually doing that work, that I may not actually end up with planning and therefore not purchase it. So there's a liability on my situation. Of course, if the vendor themselves is prepared to take full responsibility for that cost, that's fine, but the likelihood is that they aren't, because they put it on the market with lapse planning. So they are usually expecting you to incur that cost. So there should be some trade-off there about how much you are prepared to pay for the land, bearing in mind that you're taking the risk to get all the approvals in place. And so it very much reflects the price, and if the price is right, then you maybe can do that. The third way that you could actually secure it is with an option agreement, but again, the price would need to be determined by the amount of risk that you are taking. So I hope you found that useful. If you're new to the channel, there's lots of other videos around for you to have a look at, and if you haven't already subscribed, we'd love you to subscribe. It always helps us knowing that we are providing something that you're looking for. Please like and share the video also, and again, if you haven't already subscribed to our membership community, then there's a link in the description below for you to be able to do that, and I'd love to see you inside. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos, then click to watch the next video. Please remember to visit our website at builditandprosper.com to get our app, or click on the button on the YouTube header if you're on desktop.